Hello, I'm the guy who killed and is wearing the skin of your best friend. Bonjour, mi amigo. Give me your credit card details. Come on, you can trust me. I've also just eaten an entire block of peanut butter chocolate, so it's very likely that within the next 30 minutes, I will shit myself. Speaking of shit, Crash Bandicoot's racing career has seen him race through many wonderful, exciting, thrilling tracks, the likes of which Formulas 1 through 8 can only dream of. But as great as the peak of Crash Bandicoot racing is, it isn't always that good. Sometimes they're not as good, and on rare occasions they can even be shit. This is extremely rare, which is why I'm not 100% sold on calling the following 10 racetracks the worst. I don't actually think there are any outright bad tracks in this series. They're more along the lines of the least good. But that's not an exciting title, so fuck it, we'll stick with the worst. Here are the top 10 shittiest, stinkiest, absolute bottom of the barrel racetracks from Crash Bandicoot's history. Kicking us off at number 10 is Deep Sea Driving. Many people try to avoid the deep sea because of all the strange, alien-like creatures that live down there, but I avoid it to keep away from this rubbish track. Look, I'll be honest with you, most of Deep Sea Driving is fine in both versions. Nitro Kart's version has its anti-gravity gimmick going on, Nitro Fueled's version has this vagina with tentacles bit, and the rest of the track is largely inoffensive. It doesn't have any especially cool features or design quirks that make it stand out, but it also isn't a track that bores you to death. The reason I hate this track is the bastard tunnel at the end. This tunnel has a seemingly endless amount of propellers whose blade will fuck you over every time you drive through it. They don't move in sync with each other, and there isn't a lot of room in the tunnel, so you don't have a lot of time to react and get out the way. You will almost always get hit, causing you to spiral out of control in the same way your sanity does when you enter this tunnel. This is especially infuriating in Nitro Fueled when you're trying to maintain that sacred blue fire. You just cannot get through this tunnel without losing everything. And if you're one of those people who's like, actually, if you spend 10 hours learning the propeller patterns, you can time it perfectly and not get hit by them. Skill issue, then you need to have a long, hard think about what you're doing with your life. Deep Sea Driving is not a track that's interesting enough to warrant putting in any amount of effort. Even its theme is a rip-off of Ruse Tubes. The one interesting thing Deep Sea Driving has is this tunnel, and it's a bitch of a tunnel. Racing on this track feels like sticking your dick into a blender. Following up at number 9 is Assembly Lane. Assembly Lane as a track is actually more bearable to race on than Deep Sea Driving. So you might be wondering why its ranking is worse. The thing is, yes, Deep Sea Driving is a pain in the ass, but at least when you're racing on it, you feel something. It's usually a destructive emotion like anger or frustration, but at least you feel human while you're on the track. With Assembly Lane, I feel nothing. This is such a bleak, soulless track. For a track that has a fair amount of slight inclines, it could not be flatter. Its only points of interest are this magnet thing that, when activated, sweeps the track and picks up racers who drive into it, and this conveyor belt. That is it. There is nothing else in this track that is even worth the effort of coming up with words to describe them with. The track is void of anything fun or interesting, even its shortcuts are boring. Its layout is just a weaker version of Engine Labs, in fact, the whole track is a weaker version of Engine Labs. It could have gone all out with that attempt at stealing ideas and at least included the high-speed Sacred Fire tunnel, but it couldn't even be bothered to make that effort. On top of that, the presentation of it is so bleak. The industrial greys and browns combined with the toxic greens make the track look filthy, polluted, and disgusting. Imagine the smell, like sticking your nose directly into an exhaust pipe. Even Nitro Fueled couldn't really salvage its presentation. Normally Nitro Fueled takes Nitro Kart's tracks and dials them up to 100 when it comes to how they look. I mean, look at the makeover Electron Avenue got. Why couldn't Assembly Lane be transformed into a completely different track? Assembly Lane is a track that is, at best, okay. Its layout is dull, and its visuals and music don't do it any favors. Assembly Lane, more like Assembly Lame. Roasted. At number 8, following the trend of Nitro Kart tracks ripping off CTR, is Meteor Gorge. Meteor Gorge is Nitro Kart's equivalent of Blizzard Bluff, but it's not anywhere near as good. And Blizzard Bluff isn't even that particularly good either. To be honest, Meteor Gorge doesn't commit any Crash Bandicoot racing crimes. It's not like Deep Sea Driving where it has something that really gets on your tits. It's more like Assembly Lane in that it is so unremarkable to the point where you think, what's the point? Why would you want to play this track? It's a very basic course that doesn't have any unique selling points. It has a shortcut, the theme is decent enough, and it's not a long track so it doesn't wear out its welcome. But I don't know, I just don't see a reason to pick Meteor Gorge over anything else. What does Meteor Gorge have to offer that other tracks don't already have covered? It's short, it's simple, it doesn't take advantage of Nitro Kart's anti-gravity, it's not even the only snow-themed track in Nitro Kart. Barren Ruins is there as well. Meteor Gorge does benefit from trying to combine ice and fire, something that becomes more apparent in the nitro-fueled version, and that helps the track out a little bit in terms of its theme, but it's not enough to make me believe that Meteor Gorge is a good track. It's missing a certain something. Maybe it needs more hazards, not the deep sea driving kind those propellers can go fuck themselves, but I don't know, maybe it should have actual meteors that fall from the sky, or a bit of lava or fire on the track, maybe a bit more ice to make the driving a bit slipperier, just something to make Meteor Gorge stand out and be a track worth playing. Meteor Gorge is not a track I dislike, but it's also not a track I would go out of my way to play. There are so many others I would rather race on. Meteor Gorge, more like assembly lame, roasted. I've been giving Nitro Kart a lot of shit so far, so to break it up, let's talk about the original Crash Bandicoot racing game with our number 7 spot, Dingo Canyon. Dingo Canyon is a lot like Meteor Gorge in that it's a track that I never really cared for. It's obviously more fun to drive on than Meteor Gorge, given that the driving controls for both Crash Team Racing and Nitro Fueled are much better than what you'll get in Nitro Kart, but Dingo Canyon doesn't really make good use of them. It's another track with a fairly unremarkable layout. The best it's got is a brief split in the path, either side of which is almost exactly the same. I guess it does technically have a shortcut if you cut through that little off-road bit at the beginning, but it's not a shortcut that makes a meaningful amount of difference, nor is it actually fun to do. At least Meteor Gorge has a real shortcut. The most interesting thing Dingo Canyon has going for it is that there are armadillos that roll around on the road. These armadillos somehow have the strength to knock a vehicle off course. In the real world, they'd probably end up as roadkill, which I would expect, because Dingo Canyon is one of the most realistic themes for a racetrack I think I've ever seen from this franchise. And by realistic, I of course mean boring. This place is a road that you could drive on somewhere in real life. When you sit it next to flying casinos and spaceships, it really puts into perspective just how lacking it is for a Crash Bandicoot racetrack. Like, who cares? I also don't feel like Dingo Canyon represents Dingodile very well. Surely Dingodile can pull a better Dingo Canyon out of his own Dingo Canyon. I don't hate Dingo Canyon, but it definitely feels like a course made to just fill some space. I don't think anyone would consider it a highlight of Crash Bandicoot racetracks. No one likes canyons anyway. Next up on the chopping block at number 6 is Coco Park. Coco Park thematically is leagues above Dingo Canyon, especially when you look at the nitro-fueled version. In stark contrast to Dingo Canyon's complete lack of Dingodile, Coco Park is very clearly all about Coco. Massive statues, flowers and fountains, all kinds of shit in honor of Coco. It makes her seem like a princess. But when you look at the actual design of the track, it makes her seem like a baby. Coco Park is an unbelievably boring course. It's almost just a circle, with no meaningful inclines or interesting turns. There are no hazards, there is no danger, there is no excitement. Coco Park is a whole lot of nothing. I get that not every track has to be complex and full of unique, never-before-seen ideas, but tracks should at least have something, some kind of element or quirk or feature that makes you actually want to race on them. Coco Park simply does not have that. I also don't really understand the theme. Why does she get a park? With other characters' signature racetracks it makes sense. Crash has a cove, Cortex has a castle, Engine has a lab. Why does Coco get a park? None of her other game appearances involve that. Where's Coco's Great Wall of China track? That would have been so much cooler. It could have had something known as track design, with pits and turns and jumps. Instead we get whatever this is meant to be. It looks pleasant, but fuck, it's a boring course. I bet you $100 that the developers chose to do this for Coco because they believed that women were shit at driving. Don't say it doesn't make sense. She's the only girl in the Crash Team Racing cast, and they gave her a simple, pissy little circle track with basically nothing on it because they didn't think she'd be capable of anything more than that. Those misogynist bastards. At the big number 5 is no one's favourite track, Slide Coliseum. Slide Coliseum, my god. I said Dingo Canyon was the most uninteresting theme for a racetrack. I said Coco Park was the most uninteresting layout for a racetrack. But Slide Coliseum? It straight up combines the two and becomes both. A much more boring theme than Dingo Canyon, and somehow even less fun to race on than Coco Park. Slide Coliseum is fucking nothing. Its presentation is the least of its problems. It is the most generic, expected location for a racetrack I think of all time. It is just a racetrack. The setting I could compare to the Piston Cup from the movie Cars, but that's being very generous. It doesn't even have its own music track. It shares on with Tiny Arena, which is a way more enjoyable track. Nitro Fueled made an attempt to give it some life, including holograms of characters dancing and a cheering crowd, but no amount of dancing and cheering is enough to breathe life into this dead track. Not just because of the boring theme, but also because of the boring design. Slide Coliseum is, without a doubt, the emptiest, most nothing track in the history of the whole series. It's completely flat when you exclude the barriers, there are no hazards, there are no boost pads, there are no interesting turns, there is simply nothing going on here. There are ways of trying to make Slide Coliseum more fun to race on. You can try cutting corners to complete laps faster, you can try cutting barriers by jumping over them, you can try cutting your wrists so that you can feel something while you're racing on this track, but none of that is enough to make Slide Coliseum fun by any definition of the word. The only value that Slide Coliseum has is that I suppose it would be a good track to practice on. If you wanted to improve your drifting and turning and such, you could do worse than Slide Coliseum. But that's the only value it has. Slide Coliseum is about as fun as watching hair grow. There's nothing else to say about it. Coming in at number 4 is Turbo Track. Turbo Track is in many ways the sibling of Slide Coliseum, and it's also the answer to the question, what would Slide Coliseum be like if it had hemorrhoids? In theory, Turbo Track should be the complete opposite of Slide Coliseum. It shares the exact same theme, which is not opposite in any way, but Nitro Fueled attempted to give them some individuality by changing the time of day and such. Which didn't work, I'll be honest, they both look extremely similar, but they made an effort, which is something. But they're opposite in the sense that they have opposite concepts behind them. The whole point of Turbo Track is that it is covered, absolutely covered, in Sacred Fire boost pads. Which in theory sounds pretty good, right? Imagine how much speed you could build up, how fast you could go, and how fun that would be. It's a good track in theory. The idea is that you're supposed to constantly maintain incredibly high speeds throughout the entire course. But the entire course is just like Slide Coliseum in that it's completely flat. There aren't even any jumps or meaningful shortcuts in which you can make good use of the Sacred Fire. The only point of interest in this track is the double hairpin turn, which is completely impossible to make unless you know how to U-turn, a technique that is not explained or even hinted at anywhere in either version of the game. If you can't do that, you won't maintain that high speed for very long, and it's still pretty bloody hard even if you can do that. I just don't see what the point of Turbo Track is. Slide Coliseum as a pure practice track I can understand, but what about this one? What's the point? To practice maintaining Sacred Fire? There are so many tracks you can do that on, all of which are more fun to race on than this one. This, combined with the fact that the presentation is just as lame as Slide Coliseum's, means there really is no reason to play Turbo Track over any other track. And like Slide Coliseum, there's nothing else to say about it. Finally back to a real track now at number 3 with Jungle Boogie. Jungle Boogie is another track that suffers from the same problems that every other track I've mentioned does aside from deep sea driving, and that is that it's fucking boring. Jungle Boogie does have a bit more going on in terms of track design than a fair few of the previous tracks, in that it has a shortcut and this high ledge route which I think is supposed to be a shortcut, but the difference it makes is so negligible that I don't even think it deserves to be called that. You'd think with shortcuts the track would have a little something going for it. But the problem with Jungle Boogie is that it's so short. It's over before it really has a chance to get going. This might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure Jungle Boogie is the shortest track in the whole series. I reckon if it went for a bit longer, it could have had something cool to offer, because thematically, it isn't too bad. It's a jungle/temple theme, which is something Crash has done before and done better than this, but there's potential there. We could have gone higher into the treetops or gone inside a temple or something. Stuff could have happened. But it didn't. It's as if Jungle Boogie was birthed 4.5 months into pregnancy. It feels half-baked, like there should be a second half to this track, but it was just lost. What we're left with is a relatively forgettable and unremarkable track that doesn't last much longer than a minute. It doesn't have anything cool going on besides a really easy shortcut, and it's over in the blink of an eye. If a track is over almost immediately and doesn't have anything bombastic to offer in the brief time you're in it, then why play it at all? It might be fun for beginners and inexperienced racers, but for most racers I wouldn't expect Jungle Boogie to rate much higher than a literal boogie. Claiming the number 2 spot is our penultimate pisser, Barren Ruins. Barren Ruins is not a track that I expected to put this low, I'll be honest. Because when you think about it, Barren Ruins has a lot of stuff going on. It's got a bit of ice physics, it's got these robots walking around, it's got this giant boulder you can activate to crush the racers behind you, it's got a shortcut right at the end, it's got all this stuff. In theory, it has the makings of a great track. There's no reason why it shouldn't be a good track. And that's why it's so impressive that it still manages to be boring despite that. I don't know what it is about this track, but I just do not care for it. I don't think anyone does. I don't think anyone is ever excited by the prospect of racing on Barren Ruins. I think part of it lies in its presentation. I don't mean to be rude, but what the fuck even is it? I get that it's ruins, but it's no more ruined than the hundreds of other tracks based on ruins. In fact, I think it's less ruined because it has fully working boulder cranes and robots. What kind of ruins still function? It has snow, that also isn't unique, and it's not like it does snow in an interesting way. And if I'm honest, I don't even like the music for it very much. I'm no musician, but I do love a good hum and a whistle. I love it when music in games has catchy and memorable melodies that are easy to sing along to while you're playing. Barren Ruins doesn't have that. It has one of the clunkiest, strangest melodies in this series, and it's not very satisfying to whistle. It doesn't really resolve, it's just a series of notes that just keep going. If I can't have fun whistling while racing on this track, then why the fuck am I here? Despite having some good ideas, Barren Ruins falls flat for reasons even I don't understand. It feels like it should work, but it just doesn't. It's short and not sweet, making it a worthy recipient of second place. But as always, my list of candidates has more candidates than can actually fit into the number 10, so I'd like to give some honourable mentions to the tracks that I very nearly deemed bad, but couldn't quite bring myself to. Ruse Tubes. This is another one of those tracks that doesn't have a whole lot going on. It's one of the simplest courses in the series. And also, because it's the track I grinded Wampa coins on to clear out Nitro Fuel's pit stop, I'm sick to death of looking at it. But looking at it is what makes it so cool. Its presentation is too good, and you can't always slander a track for being basic. You do need a couple of simple ones, and Ruse Tubes is a decent one. Mystery Caves. I actually don't mind the layout of this track. It's nothing special, but it's got some hazards and some decent jumps and such. The only reason I considered this track is because the original version looks like the inside of an arsehole. Luckily, Nitro Fueled swooped in and made it very vibrant, lush and colourful. A pleasant track to look at. I can't bring myself to shit talk it when it doesn't look like shit anymore. Koala Carnival. From a pure track design standpoint, Koala Carnival was the most disappointing bonus track from Nitro Fueled, seeing as it is the most circular track of all the tracks. But it does have a leg up on them because it isn't totally flat. It has some jumps and hazards going on, as well as Sacred Fire, giving it a bit of life. And it's a track that is absolutely carried by its bombastic presentation, with loads of flashing lights, colours and special effects. It's a track that feels alive, more than what can be said about some of the other husks we've looked at today. But now, the moment you've all been waiting your entire pathetic lives for, the worst track in Crash Bandicoot racing history is Crash Tag Team Racing. The whole fucking thing. Crash Tag Team Racing is a game, and not a track. I know that, and I hear your cries of confusion. How can I give the number 1 spot to an entire game? Well, it's simply because every track in Tag Team Racing is just as shit as the next one. I know I've been calling every other track in this list so far bad, but honestly, I don't think any of them are actually outright bad at all. They're just not as good as all the other tracks in the series. The only tracks that I think are genuinely bad are the tracks from Tag Team Racing, and I'm bundling them all together because they're all pretty much exactly the same thing, all riddled with the same problems. I genuinely can't separate them. They all share Tag Team Racing's driving controls, which are famously much worse than anything you'll find in CTR or Nitro Kart. That's not the track's fault necessarily, but it's where you feel the difference in quality. Not that anyone actually puts up with it, we all cheese it by immediately latching onto another driver and blasting the fuck out of everyone else, then separating right at the end to claim victory. We don't actually race on these tracks, and for good reason. Tag Team Racing's tracks are generally extremely empty, lacking any interesting design, features or quirks. The best they have to offer is slight inclines and declines. On rare occasions, you might get a single jump, or maybe a hazard somewhere, but usually not. It's very rare that something happens on a tag team racing track that isn't related to you gunning the other racers down like it's war. They do have a unique presentation style, what with tag team racing's peculiar soundtrack and the fact that it's all supposed to be an amusement park, but these themes are all done better elsewhere. And also, they don't work as amusement park themes because there's nothing amusing about them. There is no reason to play any of the tracks in tag team racing because every tag team racing track is worse than everything else you'll find in any other Crash Bandicoot racing game. Even Smokey and the Bandicoot has it beaten. If I had to pick a worst tag team racing track, it would have to be Rings of Uranus, because it's just an oval and it forces you to stick around for 9 fucking laps. But I genuinely think every tag team racing track is dogshit, and far and away worse than any other racing this series has birthed. To be honest, I do kind of feel bad trashing the first 9 tracks on this list, because compared to tag team racing, they're all really good. But would you really want me to sit here and consider which of tag team racing's abortions are worse than the others? Do you really want a top 10 filled exclusively with tracks from tag team racing? I didn't think so. You'll accept every tag team racing track sharing the title of worst, and you'll be happy about it. Now if you'll excuse me, I've got to go arse blast a gut full of peanut butter chocolate. I can tell it's going to be one of those shits where I'll have to take my shirt off. It's not going to be pretty, but it'll be much prettier than anything tag team racing managed to produce. I'm off. Ta-ta!